go on the side of history and look into the epidemiological research, and you're like, okay, when did humans start consuming olive oil? When did humans start consuming butter or lard or ghee or tallow? Like, there are thousands of papers and plenty of research and studies, showing where there's evidence of civilizations using these different things. If you do the same for rapeseed oil, it's like ghost town. There's nada.
The cold pressed rapeseed argument, an extra virgin cold pressed rapeseed argument, makes no sense. And I even think a few people have said, well, it's like the nutrition content, it's all there, and they focus on this nutrition content, and because they focus on the fact of lack of hexane. So this is just, can I use the term greenwashing? There's one bit of information that I think everyone needs to read. So when I started looking into the rapeseed argument, and I focus on rapeseed because I think it's just, you go to a supermarket, it's now there's a whole section of rapeseed.
Well, I think as well, it is the one that has the main controversy because of the like omega-3 and the vitamin E content. I mean, all vegetable oils are lower saturated fat, but let's be honest, most vegetable oils, I think it's clear that it's absolute crap.
Yes. But do you know what they do with the high Erucic rapeseed that's farmed? Because if we mix it with other crap, and then it makes this crap look a lot less crap, right?
Exactly. You can say that's one of the big arguments is like, oh, it's not the oils that are bad, it's the food that you're consuming it in.
What's weird is how much like it's now being talked about more, and you've got these pro arguments coming out more towards it and these against arguments, and the against arguments people are being questioned like they're bonkers, because even these very famous influencers are just like, well, you need to, what they've said is that you need to question the sources of where these people are getting information from, and you need to question who these people are. But if you turned it around and said to them, well, actually, I'm going to question who you are and where your source of information are, because now I've questioned their sources. I'm saying, because you're cherry picking the information, and they're basically, because they're cherry picking it and saying, and focusing on the omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. Look, anyone who listens to our channel, I'm going to say this: stop following this omega-3, 6, and 9 argument. Before we start this video, firstly, thank you everyone for joining us. Really appreciate your time, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because it does help us grow the channel and invest more in our videos and the content we're producing. But before we start, I just want to make a bit of a disclaimer. You'll see I've got my laptop here today, and the reason why is when I was doing my research on this topic on seed oils, because we got requested this quite a lot, quite a few people just like in the comments like, yo, can you guys talk about seed oils? We're intrigued by your perspective, especially Tracey's.
Well, also Abby was like, everyone's talking about seed oils, like what the hell is up with this? I don't understand, please tell me. So we were like, let's tell you on video.
Yeah, so I thought, okay, let's break it down. And when I started researching this topic, it came up with some, do we call them influencers? Well-known nutritionists, doctors?
I think well-known names in the health industry.
Yeah, okay, well-known. And everyone's got their opinion, right? Yeah. And so the reason why I've got my laptop is I've made a lot of notes on this, because I don't want to trip myself up or say something that someone's going to go, no, you didn't mean to say that. So I've made sure I've made my notes today. And for anyone that knows me, you know I do my research. And what I'm going to say is everything we talk about today, anything we talk about, all of the articles, the research papers, the references that I'm going to make, they are going to be in the description, because it's not just about what we're going to say, it's about doing your own research. So I'm going to give you everything that I've picked up and learned, so it enables you to do your own research in a much more, let's say, easier way, and it gives you a good starting point. So I really hope everyone's going to enjoy this conversation, because I think it's a bit mind-blowing. And in my opinion, from what I've understood and found, is that, you know that term compartmentalization? Yeah. Right? It was a big thing back in the day where you compartmentalize different departments. This argument is so compartmentalized in a way that people's arguments are bullshit. And I'm going to say that, right? And I'm going to use that term bullshit, right? Because what they're doing is, there's a term, it's called like, is it cognitive dissonance? It's cognitive dissonance I'm thinking of, or
Well, I think reductionist as well in some of the ways that the facts of studies are deduced.
okay, well,
Yeah. I actually don't know what you're going to say, by the way. Dilly showed up with his laptop, and I'm sitting here like, oh shit, maybe I should have been doing more research. I'm like, sound, we're going to chat about seed oils. Love chatting about seed oils.
no, so the reason why,
I have no
okay,
idea what you're going to
no,
say.
it's all right. It's nothing. It's not about the controversy, but what I've started to do as I was doing my digging into this is that when I've read like the blogs or I've watched the YouTube videos, some famous ones like the Zoe Nutritionist on Stephen Bartlett, who's by the way is an investor of Zoe, so he's got a a vested interest in what Zoe say. Be careful about that one. And I'm going to make the bunny things there.
This is you in like so much. You're like, oh, I'm not interested in being controversial. You so are. I'm the one like that's clutching my seat, being like, let's just be nice to everybody.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to be bad about it. But what I'm going to say to you is this:
it's there, definitely.
this is the Can I Be Candid show. This is about research. It's about looking at data. It's all about going into it. But basically, when I started looking into the oilseed argument, what I realized these people were doing was they were cherry picking certain points of it, or in seed oils, and they were cherry picking certain bits of information. And when you start reading the blogs or the videos and you watch them, whether you're for or against it, everyone's got their argument. I thoroughly believe the people that were against it have a very good argument. And I think the people that are for it are chatting shit. But I'll prove this today. I'm going to let you start now and talk, and because you've got some really fascinating facts to talk about seed oils, and I want everyone to share it. And then I'm going to start adding a bit of meat to the bone about why it's a little bit not about like cherry picking information.
You're really winding me up here because I absolutely do not have prepared points other than just like very strong opinions, and I can absolutely break down the research on both sides and a lot of the papers, because I do think from what I've read in terms of these seed oil videos going around at the moment, and there very much is a divide, and I think you actually use the perfect term there, which is cherry picking, because I really think we're living in the age of cherry picking data. And I don't know if it's because of, social media or internet and the fact that, or like even algorithms and things coaxing what's coming up for you, but like you really can find research and data to support whatever argument you want right now. And I think it's probably one of the reasons that drove us to start Can I Be Candid? Because we were just like, I don't know about you, but some days I just get so fed up because I'm just like, gosh, people are coming to me that have no health background and they're like, what the hell do I do? Like, they're saying this, they're saying that. And I'm like, you know what? This is like my livelihood and my head feels like it's exploding sometimes. So you used a really good word there. And I think particularly when it comes to seed oils, I did listen. Abby sent me over a few kind of blogs and that Diary of a CEO video and like a few other videos that I think are surfing around at the moment that are really kind of bringing up this conversation again. So I did have a listen to those just to kind of understand, okay, what are the arguments that, people are really leaning into, either pro seed oils or against seed oils. And I definitely think, as with a lot of things, it's the way the data is being interpreted. And I think a lot of the confusion comes to the fact that, one, actually interpreting research and data is a very challenging, difficult thing to do. Like, research papers are not easy to read. They don't make them easy. And most people don't actually go and read the research afterwards. They kind of take an expert's opinion and analysis of the paper. And obviously, today, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to give you my breakdown of what I think is happening based on how research works. But absolutely, we'll link everything below do your own research, ask us questions as well. I know I'm totally rambling here, but before we go into it, I was just thinking, I was like, Rav doesn't know what we're going to talk about, and I'm so curious to know what oils Rav cooks with. Rav being our videographer, because depending on
The man behind the camera.
depending on what he currently uses, I think his mind is going to be blown. What do you cook with, Rav?
Olive oil, predominantly, pretty much everything's olive oil.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Good.
Extra virgin? Glass bottle? Dark glass bottle? Oh, he knows his stuff.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he's showing up. Okay, you're not one of those big tankard of the like plastic 5 litre vegetable oil people.
Yeah. Or is it the extended life? I really loved the new products. The extended life vegetable oil at the moment, which is quite fascinating.
Don't. I'm going to start on the pro side for seed oils because I know you're going to get down the kind of against side, and we will go there.
Oh, actually, no, Tracey. I'm not against rapeseed at all.
Not just rapeseed.
Sorry,
seed.
I'm not against seed oils because Zoe told me that I should not be against them, and they are the forefront of any research information because they've got the words professor in front of their names.
It's really
and
nothing.
I should not question anyone because they've got investors, and when you've got investors, like not one but 7 different investors, you should have enough money to be able to do the research in time. So I am fully for them because that's what the gods of nutrition told me to, let's say.
I feel sad because I was such a fan of them. I'm a big fan of Tim Spector, and well, I mean, I don't agree with everything he says, but like I do think he's done a lot for the industry. But obviously, since he's kind of taken a sidestep and there's been a lot of investors and money coming in, the quality of what's being said is not
and for
anyone listening
on the pod, I am being completely and utterly sarcastic right now, which is the way I like to be. But it's okay. I'm sorry, gods of nutrition.
Anyway, can I start talking about why seed oils are amazing?
Go for it.
Okay, so the main points that came up are that seed oils are low in saturated fat, rich in omega-3 fats, contain vitamin E, vitamin K, and have a high smoke point. So in terms of the pros towards seed oils, and when I say seed oils, we're really talking about rapeseed oil, your vegetable oil. I think it's called canola oil in the US. Rapeseed oil is sunflower oil, basically any kind of vegetable and seed oil, essentially. So those are the main points that come up for it, and particularly in that DOAC episode. And I know there was Abby had me listen to an episode with what's that nutritionist name? Another episode talking about seed oils. These were kind of the main factors of like, they're actually good for you because they're low in saturated fat, and of course, as we know, saturated fat causes high cholesterol, and so it's really, really bad. And omega-3s from these omega-3 is great. So let's not talk about the source, but just omega-3 in general is great. And because these have higher omega-3, then they must be good too. So let's break that down, because I do think that if you look at all the arguments for why this is good, it really comes back to the question around cholesterol. Because and I noticed that a lot of the discussions, they didn't actually bring up the conversation on cholesterol, but really to me, that's the root of, the argument as to whether these oils are good or not, before we get into the side of, the toxins and the manufacturing and everything like that. But just in purely to do with the research studies around the nutrition of these oils. So saturated fat, bad for cholesterol. That's the message that we're given. Clearly, we have learned absolutely nothing from decades of low-fat diets and hormonal issues and brain health issues, but that's fine. I I don't know how much we want to kind of go into the whole saturated fat thing. The general notion that's still given today is that you want to eat low saturated fat because it supports, levels of healthy cholesterol, and it lowers the bad LDL cholesterol. You know, that really bold cholesterol that causes heart disease, and it's all bad. And so most of the conversations are just focused on, oh, it's low in saturated fat. That reduces LDL cholesterol, which causes heart disease. So that means that it's good. But actually, if you actually look at the details of the research around saturated fat and cholesterol, it's the particle size which is associated as a driver of heart disease, not cholesterol. So it's small lipid particle size of cholesterol which is associated with heart disease. Not even LDL in and of itself, it's the small lipid particle size. If you look at the research, saturated fat actually boosts HDL cholesterol, but more importantly, it increases the particle size of cholesterol. So that actually reduces your risk of heart disease. So it's the small lipid particle size. And if you look at the data, there's a study that I'll link below from the BMJ that actually shows people that have switched to vegetable oils to reduce their saturated fat level have actually driven the rate of heart disease because they've reduced that particle size, which we know is what's the dangerous bit. Cholesterol is a really, really important thing that the body needs, which, as I say, we should know from all this low-fat nonsense. Do you want to know what the body uses cholesterol for? The body needs cholesterol to synthesize vitamin D. It needs cholesterol to create hormones, so supporting hormone health, fertility, reducing poor incidences of menopause, all of these conditions that we're struggling with. Really important for proper cognitive function, brain energy. Like, think of all of the things that cholesterol are required for. Massively important for digestion. It's really important for bile production, which supports liver function. Like, just think about all of the chronic issues we're dealing with today. Like, I see hormone issues all the time. Everybody has a bloody digestion issue. Detoxification, which mainly takes place in the liver. Everybody has detox issues. Oh, and cholesterol is needed to actually support all of these functions. And we're told that we need to lower our cholesterol. Cholesterol's bad. I'm just going to put that out there, okay? Just think about that for a little bit.
Well, if cholesterol was bad, the keto diet would be completely non-existent. You think about people going to onto full ketosis using high levels of fats, and people
they should be gone. Yeah,
instantly dead.
I mean, I do think I'm just gonna add to that because I know some people will think, okay, yes, that's true, but that's only because you're in a low carb environment. Because fat does work slightly differently, whether in an environment of low carb or in an environment where you're also consuming sugar and refined carbs. But even in an environment where you're still eating carbohydrate, we know that people that eat a healthy level of fat, even saturated fat, have higher cholesterol particle size, HDL cholesterol, don't have a higher rate of heart disease, and in a lot of cases have much more balanced hormones, brain function, digestive health, detoxification support, all of these things. In fact, ask the people that are talking about these studies showing that, seed oils have all of these benefits and they're, driving lower cholesterol. ask them to break that down in terms of, okay, but what types of seed oils, how is it lowering the cholesterol, what's the downside of cholesterol, is it just LDL that drives heart disease? Ask these questions, because this is how we're getting away with the general statements. We also have lots of studies showing that it is the oxidation and the inflammatory environment in the body that's driving these heart disease issues, that's driving these issues that we're associating negatively with cholesterol. Whereas most people making the arguments are just, reducing these studies to cholesterol bad, low cholesterol good. So anything that's low in saturated fat is great, and anything that's high in saturated fat is bad. But that's not true at all. As with, out of any sort of food or any sort of compound, I always say this, the quality of fats is really what matters. Because if you're getting an inflamed, toxic, oxidated fat, whether it's saturated or unsaturated, that is going to wreak havoc in your system. It's going to be a nightmare. Whereas if you get a high quality fat that is not oxidated, then you're in the business. So that's where I get into the omega-3 bit, because we float this idea of seed oils and vegetable oils, they have more omega-3 than, say, saturated fats like butter or meat or things like that. We never mention the fact that obviously oily fish is really high in omega-3 and should be high in omega-3. The thing is, yes, they have a higher amount of omega-3 than, say, butter, because butter isn't a natural source of omega-3. It's just like saying, oh, we should eat, I don't know, rice is bad because it's not a good source of protein. It doesn't make it bad. It just means that it's not a source of protein in the diet. But when we're making these arguments about seed oils containing omega-3, we're generally not discussing about the added fact that actually, ratio-wise, they're also a massive source of omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory. And now, in general, in theory, humans do need some inflammation. So traditionally, we always ate sources of food that were higher in omega-3 and lower in omega-6. But we did eat omega-6 rich fats because the body does require inflammation. We need that little spark to get things going. Although we have to think about context, because in this day and age, I have not come across someone in this modern time that has too low inflammation, that needs more inflammation. So we need to think about context. Those seed oils are a massive source of omega-6. So while they might contain omega-3 in comparison to the other oils out there or to the other fats out there, on par, on ratio, you're actually getting a massive source of omega-6 to your body. So what is this argument about, oh, they're great because they can contain omega-3? That's stupid. In fact, it used to irritate me so much, because when I worked for certain companies where we were looking at the nutritionals, and you had to do that nutritional label, which is created for processed food, not homemade food, so that's a nightmare. We always had to put rapeseed oil in because it had slightly higher omega-3 and lower saturated fat, which is what the healthy label wants you to have, and as opposed to using something like olive oil, simply because of that, which anyway. So yeah, those are the two main points, is the saturated fat level associated with cholesterol. But again, if you really break up the cholesterol argument, that's not really an argument anymore. And the omega-3 aspect, because actually it's a massive source of omega-6. You're smiling at me, and it's making me feel so nervous. And then, the fact that there is some vitamin E and vitamin K, great, but there's nowhere near enough antioxidants in these seed oils to protect from the level of oxidation that's happening during manufacturing and cooking. There's some people will talk a little bit about the fact that there's a higher smoke point as well. So, you know, the way with oils and cooking, it's all about smoke point because heat breaks down oils and causes oxidation. Again, that links to your inflammation because you want less inflammation, more anti-inflammatory action. But no one really mentions the fact, they just kind of say, oh yeah, it has a higher, so like rapeseed oil has a higher smoking point than olive oil, but they're not mentioning the fact that the reason it has a higher smoking point is because it's been refined to an nth degree and already is oxidized to the nines. So it really doesn't matter. Whereas at least something like, say, olive oil, it has such a high level of antioxidant content that it's going to mitigate some of that oxidation that happens through heating. It's not heavily processed to manufacture it. You know, I've actually been to an olive oil plant, so I've actually seen the manufacturing in person. You know, olives are very fatty. If you even squeeze an olive fruit, like you'll feel the oil. They're just being pressed. So there's no high refinement going on. So again, great that it has a high smoke point, but if it has a high smoke point because it's already filled with absolute crap, what's the point? From what I was watching about the argument for seed oils, at least nutritionally, those are the main points that came up. But again, like every single one of those can be disproved. Like that's not accurate information. And I feel for you if you're still trying to go down that route of low cholesterol, because that's how you end up on a statin for life. And that's how you end up having brain fog and hormonal issues. And it's just not a great existence. I can see you're like absolutely dying. I'm purposely focusing on the nutrition side because I know that you have a lot to say on like the manufacturing side and the processing and even the history side of it. Will we dive into the history a little bit before going into the manufacturing, or what do you think?
I mean, you can lead this, because the reason why I haven't stopped you and I've just left you to talk is because, one, it's fascinating, because your argument that you're making on the omega-3 and omega-6 is basically what everyone in the industry, anyone who's pro seed oils, is making. And it's entertaining for me to listen to your perspective, because you're a nutritionist.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Oh, and by the way, so yeah, I am a nutritionist. I'm one of those that has all the degrees and stuff. I did my stuff. I wasn't necessarily taught this in university, by the way. So it makes sense why because a lot of professionals, they go to university, they learn their education, and as long as they stick to the narrative of their education, they're covered. Like it's basically like an insurance policy. Like once you stick within the realm of what you were taught, then even if like someone says something negatively about what you're saying, you're like, it's fine, I'm covered. But I'm stepping outside of a lot of what I was taught here because I believe in good science and I know things progress, and I'm coming from experience here and all of the extra research that I've done. So just to put that out there, you know, I am a clinical expert on paper, but this isn't necessarily what we're taught in schools. So just saying that.
Okay, so hear you. Because your background's nutrition, everyone who's had this pro argument towards seed oils has looked at the nutritional content, the omega-3, omega-6. If you actually dive into the references that they're using, the references that they're using aren't on seed oils, they're specifically on omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9, right? So it's got sweet FA to do about the type of where the source is coming from.
100%.
Which is smart. Which is smart,
Very
right?
smart, yeah.
Because if I was in the industry, what I would do, and if I was someone who wanted to be pro seed oils,
looking to confuse,
I would focus on the omega-3, 6, and 9, and I'd focus on, like, you know, the conversation for me would be like, look at the nutrition content in this, and you want to dive into the history. Now, the history of seed oils, well, one of the big ones is rapeseed. In the United Kingdom, it's a big thing. And many people don't realize that rapeseed and canola oil in the US and Canada, they're the same thing. There's no difference. It's just the name, because originally it was cultivated in Canada and they put the words Canadian and oil together and made canola.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's how they kind of came up
Okay,
with the two
yeah.
names of it. So when they first created like the rapeseed oil, it was actually used in manufacturing. It was used to lubricate machines. That was the whole point of rapeseed. And then in Canada, what they've realized that because they were producing so much of it, that they wanted to make it available for human consumption. And it's only in the past, I think 40, 50 years, where I think it was like 1970,
1970,
they discovered how to manufacture it. And what they did,
they genetically modified it.
or
in
they create hybrids.
1970.
So
Yeah,
they create hybrids between the two. They either GM'd it, or they did the hybrid seeding.
GM'd it.
Yeah, well, they GM'd it, right? And so what they did is they used GM and they used these hybrid plant formations to lower that erucic acid in the actual plant. And
so just for context there, because rapeseed is naturally really, really high in erucic acid. And so in order to move it from something that was used industrially into something that could be consumed by humans, they had to find out a way to reduce those levels of erucic acid in it, or else it would be toxic to humans.
And it's what's interesting is they had to lower it under 5%, but they say that the baseline is 1%, right? That's the way it needs to go to. Now, this is where it gets fascinating. This is where Dilly gets his, actually someone said it yesterday on a podcast, they call it Dillyism. This is where Dillyism comes into it, right?
Take it away.
When they started looking at this erucic acid in the actual content of it, the whole point is when the UK started bringing it over, we wanted to reduce the percentage of it. And so, do you remember I said about this argument that everyone's talking about with seed oils, and it's always about what's in the content of it?
Yeah, they always just focus on
the content.
The content. They never make any claims about the processing or anything like that.
Which is the same with other industries as well. The nutrition industry as well. I've had the same problem here, right? I started looking into how it was made. Yeah. And in particular, like we're from the UK, so I was fascinated by the UK.
I mean, I'm from Ireland.
Well, you're from Ireland. Well, I'm from, we're based in the UK. I started looking into how we're producing it in the United Kingdom. And that erucic acid is fascinating because the way that we've controlled it has been in two ways, right? And I started realizing that I remember watching, Clarkson's Farm. The TV. Basically,
you made me watch that.
Basically, Clarkson did this bit, right? And I was fascinated by what he did, right? He was making rapeseed, and they dropped it off to the place where it gets processed, the grain seeds. And what they did is they extracted a little bit of it, and like the top part of it, and they checked like the mold content, the mycotoxin content, and the erucic acid content of it. And what they said was, if it was low, then that's fine, they can process it. But if it was above the threshold of like, I think it's like 2% is the maximum threshold you can get to, there was a problem. But what they didn't say, and this is in the documentation from the government, is if it has a high erucic content on the actual grain of it, it doesn't matter because we're producing so much of it, when it mixes in together, the average percentage will lower down. So, and this is, by the way, this is not me just talking. I'm going to add the notes from this, right? Which is fascinating. So that's one thing. And then I started looking at how in the UK we've managed to control this acid, right? And basically, in the United Kingdom, in 2003, they were trialing genetically modified rapeseed, right? And basically, the paper came out, it got banned. The UK banned GM rapeseed. The reason being was that they found that bees were going in and they were attaching the pollen from the genetically modified rapeseed, and they were actually cross-breeding it with other plants. And the reason why they were talking about GM rapeseed, right, was because these genetically modified like seed oil plants were basically resistant to herbicides.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm following there, because they had to genetically... I know obviously historically they used to call rapeseed really referred to kind of the brassica family, so it could be a number of different plants that were counted as rapeseed. But my understanding is they had to genetically modify that to reduce the Erucic acid in 1970s. So what do you mean by they're genetically modifying the plant in 2003?
So what they were doing, they were testing seeds, like new forms, like new hybrid
So
plants.
basically I wonder if the distinction is because obviously in the 1970s it would have been a more natural, organic, genetically modified process.
Now it's like CRISPR technology.
Yeah, so the plant they were using technically actually was already genetically modified, but it was a different categorization. So it's seen. Okay, I understand you. Sorry, I wasn't following.
I hope everyone else understands me as well when I'm going at here.
Yeah.
But it was so basically the reason why I talked about the 2003, it was like a piece in the Guardian that I was reading, and it was just fascinating that they were talking about that. The problem is that the farmers were saying that if they put them in specific fields, these GM foods, and they kept it away from like the natural or the organic plants, it was completely safe.
Yeah.
But what they were saying was that wasn't true, because bees would attach themselves to the GM foods and they could cross-pollinate the plants, and that cross-pollination could last for years and years and years. So that was fascinating. But you mentioned a word there, the Brassica family. Now, in the UK, we call it, we talk about the Erucic acid and how we want to reduce that. And to reduce it, we have to use specific seeds. Yeah. Now, these seeds that they're talking about, that we talked about before, they have been hybridized between other plants, so using cross-gene pollination to make sure that it reduces it. But what they don't tell you is how we actually plant those seeds. So there's actually different forms of Brassica plants. And in rapeseed, the biggest problem is this increase in Erucic acid. And remember I was saying about how they're only using a touch of the seed when they're testing it. So you could have like 5 tons of your seed will come in, and some could be high in Erucic acid, but we wouldn't know because we're not testing every aspect of it. We're only testing a portion of it.
What do you mean we're not testing our food properly?
Yeah,
Shock.
So in the United Kingdom, what happened was farmers wanted to farm rapeseed, because with rapeseed, it's a difficult plant to farm, but it's also an easy plant to farm in some ways.
And it's something we have in abundance in Britain. So just think about the economic impact of that grain as well.
It makes a lot of money for us, basically, because it can be used in animal feed. It can be used for human consumption as well,
which is always an important thing to remember when we're having these conversations.
Yep. So the farmers basically came together, and there was a process called the Clearfield system. And what Clearfield is, and this gets into the cold pressed rapeseed, right? Because this is going to...
because this is another point that's brought up a lot. So remember we said, a lot of people arguing, say, the nutritionals, but then another argument when people do touch on the manufacturing is always, oh, well, I only use cold pressed. So
what they found was that they had these 4 plants. They were called charlock, runch, hedge mustard, and shepherd's purse. Not shepherd's bush, shepherd's purse. And what they did, they're called oilseed rape volunteers. And what they're called volunteer plants. They're plants that can be mixed in the seeds of rapeseed, right? They can be grown in it, and they can travel, as I was saying, through bee pollination. And these 4 volunteers are the main ones that, if they are near, like, what we would call GM rapeseed, because let's be honest, it is GM regardless of how we look at it, it would actually increase the Erucic acid by 1%. So one plant, around 50 rapeseed plants, can increase it by 1%.
Okay.
Because one of these 4 volunteer plants can have up to 50% Erucic acid in them. Okay. That's how high it is. Yeah. So basically, because they're in the same ground, it's feeding the rapeseed. Does that make... And I hope everyone listening is following me. Now, what they did, these farmers, well, not farmers, these seed companies, so not the farmers, don't blame the farmers, sorry, apologies, take that back.
Usually scientists, actually, food scientists and agricultural scientists.
What they found was this Clearfield chemistry system. And what the Clearfield system is basically they created this new gene of rapeseed that was resistant to specific herbicides. And what they do is they use this herbicide called Claravo, I think it's called, And this Clearavo works with a Clearfield. It works with specific rape seeds. So when you plant these, I think like 5 different rape seeds, you pick the variation you want, or you can do like a mix of each one. You plant them, and then using this Clearfield system, you use these specific herbicides. These herbicides, when you spray them, it reduces the other 4 volunteer plants in the ground. Therefore, the Erucic acid is kept low. So what they've added to this is now the argument becomes, because nutrition focuses, well, these plants, they've been grown specifically to have low uric acid. That's bullshit. What they've done is they've created a herbicide which is added into it, and then we have to get into what these herbicides do to the system. So these herbicides, one is called, I'm going to say this wrong, is imazamox, which is a systemic herbicide, and it basically stops the growth of plants. And the other one is called quinoline carboxylic acid. And these both are designed to kill these strains of volunteer plants, right? And they are known as ALS inhibitors. And what ALS inhibitors are is they basically prevent the production of branch chain amino acids. So they destroy a specific strain of amino acid in these volunteer plants, but they don't, but these rapeseed are grown to resist these herbicides. I'm going to say this again. These herbicides are used on these plants. So if you think about that, and if I said to you voluntarily, I'm going to spray these herbicides onto your system, you would be outraged, right? But it sets in the food supply.
Yeah.
So
because we know herbicides aren't good.
And you know that when they get into the human body,
they can be toxic.
They can be toxic. Yeah. Bearing in mind, this is how they're controlling the uric acid, right? This gets deeper, by the way, now. And I started reading into this cold-pressed rapeseed thing, right?
See, this is the info I want. This is what I...
And basically, I started looking into these basically cold-pressed seed oils, and they were saying that their argument is that they're better than what's in the food and stuff, because cold pressed rapeseed is better because they're not using like hexane. Hexane's the chemical they spray over rapeseed to extract as much oil as possible. Which
is, by the way, one of the arguments that comes up a lot against the use of rapeseed and seed oils is because we know from third-party testing that there's a lot of this hexane is still in the final product, and it's absolutely toxic to humans. And then that's the argument for people saying, oh, well, cold pressed is fine because it doesn't need hexane as part of the processing and the manufacturing. So
yeah, and in the argument from those people that are for the seed oils, they say like, oh, it's completely fine because hexane only changes the chemical structure a little bit and it reduces a bit. Basically, this cold pressed rapeseed, I kept looking into it thinking, what the heck is in this then? So what I've just spoke to you about the Clearfield chemistry is what's put into these. So when they're getting those seeds and they're crushing them down, because there's no way of removing those chemicals, it's not washed or anything. So what you're getting is a complete pure cold pressed rapeseed, which is phenomenal marketing, and it's called extra virgin because they're the key words to it. They're wording it like that, but then they're not talking about the herbicides and how they're made. So that's not organic, it's not natural, it's basically a genetically modified seed that they've pulled the words from olive oil. Now, Tracy just made a point, and she said a point, and we made the point a minute ago, that rapeseed was only discovered in the 1970s. Olive oil has been around for thousands of years.
No, so this is another aspect that really... I think when I first started looking into rapeseed, just personally, not for this video or anything, but because I remember there was massive marketing around rapeseed oil around 10 years ago in Britain in particular. And it's just curious, okay? So just look it up yourself. It's just interesting. If you go on the side of history and look into the epidemiological research and you're like, okay, when did humans start consuming olive oil? When did humans start consuming butter or lard or ghee or tallow? There are thousands of papers and plenty of research and studies, showing where, there's evidence of civilizations using these different things. If you do the same for rapeseed oil, it's like ghost town. There's nada. And like the most concrete research only really starts from the industrial era, where it shows that it was used for, manufacturing processes, industrial processes, sometimes thrown to the animals as like to bulk up. But then there's a few quotes that come up saying, oh, we think there's some evidence to suggest that it might have been used in China about 4,000 years
in
ago.
India.
In India, about 2000 BC or whatever. But I tried to look further and I was like, if you kind of go the next step, it's like, where are these studies? The only concrete evidence I could find, and if someone can find something else, please do drop it below because I genuinely am curious, is that they processed it and used it for lamp oil. You know
what it was? And I'll tell you where the confusion is, because
Yeah.
and I know you're going to get at, because I've seen my mum do it.
Yeah.
It's mustard oil.
No,
because brassica is more than one plant. It's like 50, I think, different versions of it.
Exactly. So it used to be named as like multiple different plants. And
we
obviously
use
we know
mustard
in
oil.
India, I think in India, definitely that mustard oil was used traditionally. And I think that's where the confusion is. But in ancient China, the best evidence I can find, at least, and I'm not a historian, so please share the articles, is that it was used for lamps. And also there was like a little bit of a suggestion maybe in like Germany that some of the really poor, impoverished people might have used some a little bit, but the evidence just really isn't there. It's a little bit confusing. So yeah, I just think that's really curious. And if it was consumed by humans and it is perfectly safe for human consumption, why is there no evidence of it?
See, that's the problem as well. Like, the history doesn't play a role in it, because in Indian tradition we would use mustard oil because mum uses it in her lamps, and I'm sure Rav's family would do the exact same thing, where they use it when they literally douse the cotton into the mustard oil, pour the mustard oil in, so it allows it to burn.
Well, it's used for loads of like ailments, but it's never ingested, as far as I understand.
I've never seen mum ingest mustard oil.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
No, traditionally, and as I understand, it's never ingested.
So, which is fascinating.
Maybe for a reason.
Yeah, probably for a reason. The reason why I bought the Erucic acid content and this clear system is the cold pressed rapeseed argument, an extra virgin cold pressed rapeseed argument, makes no sense. And I even think a few people have said, well, it's like the nutrition content, it's all there, and they focus on this nutrition content, and because they focus on the fact of lack of hexane. So this is just, can I use the term greenwashing? Would that count as greenwashing?
I mean, I don't know if greenwashing is the right term, but I don't think there's necessarily a term that's more accurate. It's definitely in that genre of just kind of using marketing to portray a narrative that really isn't the full picture. Because, if you think about the idea of cold pressed, if you look at these rapeseed plants, it's not as if they're these like big oily seeds like olive oil is, which is a fruit that you press and you can see the extraction of oil. It takes a lot of work to extract oil from these things, and it's usually not a clear oil that's coming out. And again, as you mentioned, the need for the herbicides in order to produce this that can be cold pressed. But if we're not measuring for the herbicides, I don't know if there's some like at home test you can do to like measure your bottle of rapeseed oil, but we're not doing it. But the fact it's in a fancy glass bottle and we're told that get your oils in glass, and the fact we use these extra virgin, titles and stuff which aren't relevant to rapeseed, makes you feel like it is a health product. Because it's true, you should buy your oil in glass, not clear glass, dark glass. That's a really important distinction. But it does give you that feeling, oh, this is a health product.
100%. And that's the problem, is that a lot of the companies are focusing on, a lot of people focus on this. And like, the reason why I brought the Erucic acid again, by the way, is because there was actually, it was funded by the Agriculture and Horticultural Development Board. They actually funded research into, and they had ones that actually figured that volunteer oilseed rape was actually increasing the Erucic acid content of rapeseed. And when actually one of the main person who was leading it is a guy called David Leaper, and in the UK we supply something called 00 crops. They're the crops that have the low Erucic acid, that they're the crops that we're meant to be using, right? And he even said, this is in 2018, so it's not long ago, he said there are no specific pre-crush checks, so before they crush the plant and stuff, how it was probably sufficiently diluted in the crush so that it was never detected in the final product above threshold levels. And then remember, I always say at the start, listen to my wording and this people's wording, he added the word he reckons.
Yeah.
So what we're basing this on is hope.
Yeah.
Us hope that this shouldn't be physically in there. Now, that's interesting about the UK rapeseed, right? However, there's one bit of information that I think everyone needs to read. So when I started looking into the rapeseed argument, and I focus on rapeseed because I think it's just, you go to a supermarket, now there's a whole section of rapeseed.
Well, I think as well, it is the one that has the main controversy because of the like omega-3 and the vitamin E content. I mean, all vegetable oils are lower saturated fat, but let's be honest, most vegetable oils, I think it's clear that it's absolute crap.
Yes. But do you know what they do with the high Erucic rapeseed that's farmed? It's turned into something called rapeseed meal, RSM.
Oh, I do know this.
Rapeseed meal is then fed to the animals, and around about 40% that's actually grown is given to animals. So bearing in mind, if that Erucic content, bearing in mind it's very toxic to the body and causes a lot of inflammation, it's given to the animals. Animals then consume it, and then we consume the animals. What do you think is going to happen to the person's body? This is the exact same argument. And if you look at I'll link the other video in the description. We did an interview with JGAC CO, who did research on antibiotics, and how in the antibiotics now entering the animals, now entering us in a really bad way.
But can I just from what you're saying there, because I think that's a really important, a good place to mention this as well, because there is quite a divide in this kind of seed oil pro or against seed oil argument. And the people that tend to be really adamantly against seed oils are saying, you know, oh, the alternatives are your butter, your tallow, your lard, your ghee, your, you know, all of these animal-based fats. And then often the people that are pro it, you know, they're all like, no, we need our vegetable fats, and, you know, saturated fat is bad, da 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 da. Hopefully I cleared that idea of saturated fat being bad. Hopefully I cleared that up. But what you're saying is that is an important point in terms of your source matters, because I'm in complete agreement. We can do another video on like the fats that we use to cook and like what I consider good fats and what I wouldn't use. But quality matters. So some of those fats like ghee, butter, tallow, lard, there is evidence that they can be really healthy. But if they're coming from animals that are being fed this, then you might as well just consume the oil, because you are, even if you think you might not be. So I think that's an important distinction as well. Just because you're not taking the bottle of cold pressed extra virgin rapeseed oil doesn't mean that you're not consuming it somewhere in your diet. So just be aware of that.
And this is the next part of the argument that you talked about there. So what the focus has been on as well is like what the rapeseed meal does to the animals. That's just one avenue you can go down, and I'll tag all the research on that in the description. But what's interesting is we've not been talking about the rapeseed that's added into food products. So what the argument from the people for rapeseed is they're like, well, rapeseed is added into processed foods. So it's all these processed foods. And because these processed foods are bad for you, it's not the actual rapeseed, it's the processed foods that are bad for you.
And also soybean oil. It's not just rapeseed. So soybean oil, vegetable oil, sunflower oil.
Yep.
A lot of those are the ones that are in these foods.
Which is great, because if we mix it with other crap, and then it makes this crap look a lot less crap,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. You can say that's one of the big arguments is like, oh, it's not the oils that are bad. It's the food that you're consuming it in. It's the packaging.
Right. Now comes when I said to you about compartmentalization of the government, this is where it came from. I started reading about how much we produce in the United Kingdom, and I came across a document from the FDA in 2024, which basically looked at the yields of UK rapeseed oil. Okay. Which you're probably thinking, why the heck are the FDA in the USA looking at the UK rapeseed oil production? It was because in 2024, basically a seed manufacturing company made an application to the United Kingdom in the exportation and importation in the UK of a genetically modified CRISPR rapeseed plant. And what happened was the US FDA were tasked with looking at the production, and this is just my reasoning around it, and I'll tag the document in below. They were looking at how disappointing the yields were in the United Kingdom. In the document, it highlights the fact that because our yields were so disappointing, and we've actually had a downturn in how much is being produced, and you can read this in this Clearfield system that they've created, we started to import to fulfill the deficit. That importations come from the EU, which has completely different guidance on the amount of Erucic acid percentage in that rapeseed. So we've actually imported some of the rapeseed meal for the cows. And the reason why the US is so interesting is because the US and Canada have so much of the rapeseed. They're interested they're interested in exporting it over to the United Kingdom to bring it into here. But secondly, that was one of the reasons. And secondly, is because they're also trying to they've actually not petitioned the government, but they've asked for a scientific opinion. So when you're bringing a new product onto the market that's not been tested, you do something called getting a scientific opinion. And that's where you present the data, and a group of independent scientists will come in. And if you're watching on YouTube, I did do the bunny ears again, because these independent scientists will review the documentation, and then they give you an opinion of what is allowed.
Which, by the way, is a process in and of itself that takes a lot of money in order to just do that. So you need to have someone with a lot of money that's invested in getting this on the market in order to even get that scientific opinion, because science is not free. It is bought and paid for in the day that we live.
Oh yes, I'm going to put my laptop away now because I've given all my main points. Why I bring this up is follow the money, as they say, and everyone, like, someone may say that, like, they may make the argument that we're coming in the aspect of conspiracy theory, but this isn't conspiracy theory. This is just following the money.
I don't even think that's a fair statement. Like, I don't think that there's anything conspiratorial about this at all. This is literally, all of this data is widely available.
But it's compartmentalized, Tracy.
Yeah.
Because it's been, if you look at this information that's out there, like, in my opinion, where I'm at with this whole argument of whether seed oils are good or bad, I stand in the field of watch this space, because what's weird is how much, like, it's now being talked about more, and you've got these pro arguments coming out more towards it, and these against arguments, and the against arguments people are being questioned like they're bonkers, because even these very famous influencers are just like, well, you need to, what they've said is that you need to question the sources of where these people are getting information from, and you need to question who these people are. But if you turned it around and said to them, well, actually, I'm going to question who you are and where your source of information are, because now I've questioned their sources. I'm saying, because you're cherry picking the information, and they're basically, because they're cherry picking it and saying, and focusing on the omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. Look, anyone who listens to our channel, I'm going to say this. stop following this omega-3, 6 and 9 argument. That's information's been around for ages. That's just one aspect. Actually look at the source of where these plants are coming from and what they're doing. And I'm going to read that information in below, because you've got to wonder why are they suddenly pushing this narrative that it's good more? There's something going on there that just doesn't make sense there, because we've now got this problem with farmers in the United Kingdom who are being absolutely like screwed by our government. And you've got to wonder what, you know, the big conversation is about vertical farming, about how they want to get vertical farming, but vertical farming involves a lot of genetically modification plants.
Yeah. I think we're kind of like, the question really is why is it all of a sudden this superfood that no one ever knew about and our ancestors never consumed? Well, all of a sudden it's this wonder food. And I think, as you were mentioning with the research, we are living in a time where you can't really discuss nutritional data or food data or have an argument about what's healthy and what's not without also discussing the manufacturing and production practices. And if someone is ever trying to argue outside without talking about both of those sides, I would question their data, no matter who they are. There was something I wanted to say just to finish this. Oh, there was one point that I just wanted to bring up, because it just irked me a little bit. There was one podcast that was talking about rapeseed oil, and again using the nutritional arguments without bringing up the other aspect, talking about the use of cold press. And they kind of mentioned, oh, you know, it's a big challenge, all of this. There's a lot of like scaremongering these days around, you know, oils and like what's good and what's bad. And it actually genuinely upset me. And I don't know what that says about me, but it actually made me really sad, because I so struggle and I so hear that in terms of the fear mongering and the scaremongering. There's so much of it going on, not only in like what foods are good and bad, what's nutritious and what's not, but even just in terms of, you know, how you approach your health or illness, or, you know, I think probably in lots of industries, there's a lot of fear mongering and scaremongering going on. But it just really upset me when it was applied in that way, because it was almost suggesting like, oh, you know, people that are saying that, you know, this seed oil is bad, you know, it's just all part of this noise that's trying to like scare you into confusion of you should eat that, you should eat this. And I'm like, that narrative is driven by big food. And like, I don't want to fearmonger. I hate that fearmongering. I hate all of this focus on, you know, calories and sugar and you're doing this wrong. And even as someone in the industry, it just feels like, you know, every day you're doing everything wrong and there's a new thing that comes up that you shouldn't eat, or, you know, this is bad, or this is going to kill you, or this is going to da da da. And it is a lot. But also, there is a lot of bad information. You know, like these seed oils are absolutely toxic for you. So I take issue with the fact that you're kind of brushing it off and saying, "Oh, it's just fear-mongering," because it's kind of a way of saying, "Oh, don't look over here. You know, people are just trying to scare you. Don't look over here. Don't look behind the curtain at all of this research." And it bothers me because it's like, but what about all of this evidence that it is making you sick? And I think there has to be a little bit of a balance. Like, just because we're sharing this information here today, it doesn't mean that you immediately have to be terrified and like look at all of the labels and look at everything. I just think it's a good food for thought. And also, like, I don't even know, you know, do whatever you want. If you want to consume seed oils and vegetable oils and everything like that, like, do that. That's fantastic. You don't have to agree with what we're saying. But also, if you're kind of on the fence and you're not sure, there's tons of other oils out there and fats to cook with. There's olive oil, which we know has been consumed for millennia. There's butter, there's ghee, there's coconut oil, there's tons of other options. So if you're even on the fence, what's the harm in just avoiding it? What is the harm? I don't know.
So,
That's all I'm saying. Until you have a definitive answer that, oh, this 1000% is the healthiest thing ever, why not just avoid it?
I don't disagree with anything you said there. It's just the behind the curtain view is just a very weird way of looking at things, and I think the fear mongering that's come out from it. It's not fear mongering. It's people actually going in and looking at the data and everything I've spoken about today and mentioned on my side. This isn't fear mongering. This is just publicly available information that you go. But all I've done is instead of compartmentalize. Oh God, I'm not going to say this word out today. Compartmentalizing things. I've brought all the different sections in together, aspects of it. Like I said, it's more the argument's bigger than the 369. That's just a very fluffy, nice little fluff piece to push the positive that narrative.
To me, that's fear mongering.
That's fear mongering as well. Yeah,
it's just like it's totally dismissive. It's dismissing intelligent human beings because it's saying, oh well, you're not a scientist or a dietitian or a doctor, so you can't read research. We're telling you, oh, it's fine. They're just trying to fearmonger. Don't look behind this curtain. You're just a poor little everyday person. You don't understand. It's actually mocking people's intelligence. It like everyone has the capability of reading a study and coming to using common sense and deducing information. So stop treating us like we're absolute idiots.
It's okay though, because these people are the popular ones and they're the ones like behind the scenes. So just leave them to it. I think we've linked the research, we've linked the information. It's all down below. Yeah. Put it together yourselves, do your own research, and just let us know what you think about rapeseed or seed oils.
And again, we don't have an investment here. We're just sharing information because it is a topic that a lot of people have asked questions on. So yeah, if we didn't cover anything or you disagree with something we're saying, like please do leave a comment and ask us, because we're just trying to learn and figure out what's best, for us as well.
Bit of free thinking.
So yeah, and if after listening to this video you're like, you know what, I feel like bathing in rapeseed oil, then power to you, do that. That's fine. I'm gonna stick with the ancestral knowledge, I think.
Yeah, me too.
I'm gonna stick to that cold hard data.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.